The last time you were in Haiti, what was something that you saw, an event, a person, an experience that gave you great hope? And what was something that you saw that made you realize we have so much work still to do?
Well, we're in a particular moment in Haiti now. One of the things that, if I can take your question to, what gives me great hope? You just saw an example. Mm-hmm. The people of Haiti give one great hope. There was a thing that made things much easier for us, because in terms of being, if I have a strength in Haiti, it's knowing I'm never going to understand Haiti. I'm never going to be Haitian. And so every day is kind of magic for me, because it is a very, very magic place. But when I've looked at the way that NGOs around the world, and in particular in the history in Haiti, have dominantly separated themselves from government, and in many cases, and throughout the years, for many legitimate reasons. I think that when an NGO doesn't work hand in hand with the government as well as the people, that is the way that you're ultimately going to be on the treadmill, and you will certainly give yourself job security, and you will always have the poor by your side. Countries need governance, and so we came in at a very fortunate time, because even after the earthquake, there was a status quo in place. There were all the legendary, political culture issues ongoing, and the people said no. And they stood up and they showed us, it was clear to us, that who they wanted in leadership. So we didn't have to make a political decision, and it wasn't ours to make. We knew this is the team that they've chosen. This is the people, this is the leader they chose. Now we know the team to work with. And so with that clarity and with this kind of new day, so you then had, I always want to, if I have the opportunity, share the physics of what has been the last almost 3 years, mm-hmm. where one who's been there and is certainly quick to complain on the question of where did all the money go? Well, the answer is, if you're there every day, I think you have a legitimate reason to complain, because it's slow. People are still suffering from 1.8 million people in displaced, down to about 370,000 people. Well, that's where the money went. Enormous miracles have happened, and in particular when you consider that the UN, as well as the Haitian ministries, were in complete collapse. The death toll was among those most committed, those who, the government offices that generally close at 4 o'clock, the earthquake happened at about 5 o'clock.
They lost a lot of human capital.
They lost an enormous amount of human capital. So to be 2.5 years later, and to have experienced that initial flood of support and money that was devoted to Haiti, but devoted in circumstances where it's very difficult to get out there and describe to people the nuance of the ministries without capacity to properly spend it, and so on. So now we're at this kind of moment where you have two things working towards the middle, which is the people of Haiti have significantly recovered from the most potent aspect of the trauma, and they're ready to do it. And then you have a leadership. And now we have to somehow get projects, move with them to see those projects become visible first to the people of Haiti and then to the people of the world. Because Haiti is this little half island that is really, by population, only a city. It's 9 million people. Approximately 9 million people. And so this country of 9 million people, an hour and a half from Miami Beach, can be an incredible model for development, for the whole world. And frankly, I think that we're just in this, that when you talk about, what gives me hope, well, I feel selfishly, I feel just excited that those of us that are working in Haiti now are I think we all feel very much like we're in the front row of this heroic slave rebellion state's first chance, where it has its neighbor, the United States, is considering much fairer trade policy issues and so on. And so it's an exciting time to be in Haiti. And so with every day, there are, of course, heartbreaks and frustrations, but there are also lights that you can't put out. And so, we're witnessing history, I think.
There's been a change in the political leadership in Haiti since the earthquake. How has that affected your work? How has it affected the rebuilding of the country?
Well, you had previously, I was actually I have a lot of respect for President Preval, the former president, but I think that it was quite clear that he himself was rather traumatized by the earthquake, and it didn't feed into the strengths of his leadership skills. The very decisive leadership that's in there now, I think, is exciting and motivating everyone. But you have, President Preval was a lame duck candidate when the earthquake happened. So there were also concerns about project commitments and donor project commitments, whether or not those would be implemented by the following administration. Once the people chose a new leadership, it wasn't, I wouldn't play apples and oranges between the previous president or the leadership and the current leadership, except that the current leadership now has a significant period of time in which to begin implementation and the design of those projects.
Let me roll back a little bit. When you first got to Haiti after the earthquake, when did you realize this was going to be more for you than someone who cares rushing in, spending a significant amount of time to this being an extremely long-term, and I'm suspecting lifelong commitment for you?
Well, it's funny, because as I look past you, I see Kate Stewart with Architecture for Humanity. And if I say Architecture for Humanity, I can finish on this hand the organizations I'm aware of in Haiti, now or historically, that have done it and have not done it damage and have helped it. We were early on, in fact, had someone from that organization embedded with us, which was a great help because they had such a great understanding of development, early on, and things that we learned from. But really, the moment that I decided I wasn't going anywhere, we had originally gone in there to bring IV pain medication. Mm-hmm. I had seen on the news, my son had had an accident where I became very grateful for the existence of medically managed morphine to relieve pain, and so I'd seen that amputations were ongoing. There were no IV pain medications, and I had access to 350,000 vials of morphine. And that was delivered to the Venezuelan embassy, where we got our pickup trucks, and so it was a group of doctors that we brought in because we had some room for them. And then people willing to run around pickup trucks and deliver medications, and our plan was to be there for 2 weeks. And very quickly we got involved we got embedded in a camp, which was at the time the largest internally displaced camp, which later we came to manage. And so it became known, because I wanted it known to organizations that had medical infrastructure and so on. We got it out there that we had this big supply. So while we were trucking stuff out every night, we didn't know everywhere to go. We were new in town. And in the management of the camp, we had a big rain, and so the commanding officer of the United States military and some of his people were up at our tent camp meeting with us in the back room. That we had a back tent, or like a staff tent. And in the middle of this rainstorm, one of my staff came back and interrupted us and said that there was an organization, one that I had actually contributed to in the past, a medical organization, that needed morphine. I said, give them all they want. I had morphine like this in my tent.
That is an odd image.
Yeah, it's called temptation. So I said, I was involved in the meeting with the soldiers, and I said, just give it to them, give them all they need. And our meeting went on for another hour and a half in the pouring rain. And I had staff down in the camp, because at the time we had no lighting in the camp, and it was mayhem down there, so they were down there with flashlights and and I had to get back down into the camp. So finally, as we walked the general and his people out, that organization was just driving off. And there wasn't that much on the back of their truck. I saw it as it drove off in the rain. And I asked the fellow who had originally come and interrupted us, what are they doing? I mean, I thought the point was that people were suffering. They were getting this stuff to them. And he rolled his eyes and he said, they were labeling it, which means they were taking the stamp of their organization and putting it on it so that they would
get the credit for.
And, you know, coming in brand new, homicide's a consideration. You just can't make the connection. Now, of course, NGOs are dependent on funding. This was the emergency phase of things. And so what it reminded me of was my day job. I said, this is very much like what happens in the movies, but the stakes are much higher. And I think I know how to do this.
Do you mean all of the bullshit?
All the bullshit, yeah. And so we decided to stay, and out of that, we very quickly had people like Dominique Haitians coming and wanting to work for their country, and we were able to give them support, and then figure out ways to build more support. And as you watched them build the organization, and as I increasingly felt like a very, I do feel valuable to it, but like a valuable bystander in a Haitian organization, you're also looking at kind of, you get on a railroad track in a tunnel and the trains come and you got to keep running until the job's done. So now it's a constant process of finding in the octopus that is JPHRO and the several things that we're involved in. When will we, for example, with rubble removal and engineering, we're currently demolishing the presidential palace. There are many buildings still to be demolished that are dangerous, to be retrofit. There are still things to be built to get people out of camps. But once the job is done, earthquake related, because that's why we were there in the first place, well, then we have all of these trained engineers now, and these teams. And you can just cut that arm off, give some financing to them to make these engineering companies, and get into wherever the next gap is. And that's kind of where you're looking for where you can get out of the way.
Hey, Scott, do we have some of the photos loaded? Is that a yes? All right. Can you do a little show and tell us? Okay,
so this is what our camp looked like.
It's right there, too, if you want to crank.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, it's easier for me to see.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was once a golf course, the only golf course in Port-au-Prince. If the walls about 16 feet high surrounding the golf course, half of it is in a neighborhood from what you'd call Haitian middle class to slum. The other half moves up into outside the walls as it goes uphill, moves into the areas of the bourgeoisie. And probably most people in the neighborhood had never seen this before, this empty space surrounded by a very congested city. Until the earthquake happened, the wall came down, and within days, 35,000 people were there. These are now tarp shelters. Initially, it would have been bed sheets, cardboard shacks, things like that. All of these have dirt floors, and this is on a hill at about this incline. So this was initially determined as the most dangerous subject to flood and mudslide of all the camps. And so what was needed was to get some drainage mitigations in initially, and that was why there was an emergency relocation in the beginning. But this had represented about 35,000, and then when food distributions happened, within about 10 days, it blew up to 60,000 people. So one of the things that we and other organizations now are most concerned about are the remaining 370,000 people in camps. This camp is down, we've been able to relocate over 40,000 people, so we're down to about 14,000 now. But you're also in a situation where you had an overpopulated city to begin with, living in multi-level structures on very small plots. You have a lot of complicated land tenure issues. So if you're coming back to get people back into those places, about 97% of the population here were renters. So now to try to get people who were renters back and approved by landlords back into those properties with livelihood programs and some kind of way that they're going to be able to stay and find a way to ultimately pay their way and so on is the big complication now, because the people remaining in the camps are really the most needy, the ones that had the fewest options in the first place.
This makes me wonder, when you talked about the renters, Haiti had problems before the earthquake. It's a hideously obvious statement. Is there opportunity out of this tragedy for people who had difficult circumstances, that with the rebuilding, that there can be an infrastructure and a future that includes them in a way that perhaps they weren't included before the earthquake?
Yeah. Yes, I think that there's an enormous opportunity. It's not, and I think it's one that the world's obligated to pay attention to, because so many resources have been pulled out of Haiti, and Haiti has become import dependent, where it has enormous sectors of export potential. Everything finally in Haiti is going to come, in my opinion, is going to come down to jobs. I'll give you an example. For example, when you look at education as an emergency intervention, well, of course, every young brain that is not being exercised and encouraged is going to suffer permanent damage for that.
Deprivation, yeah.
So you have to provide education. At the same time, in the long term, any good education you're providing is only to educate them out of the country, because there's no job for them to apply that education to. So it's always looking for some way to integrate. And this is where technology is so important, where, in all the conversations that I've had, with the people I've talked to from Google and so on, is getting information chains integrated, access integrated, so that the parts of this puzzle can work together, and where you can develop an agricultural sector that can bring the peasant class up while you're educating their children, and that those, it's not rocket science, and it's particularly not rocket science with a country of 9 million people, where you can really model a success and learn a lot of lessons.
Can we look at the next slide? You talked about your organization has a lot of local folks who work in it, yeah? Why is that important?
Why is it important that it's local? Well,
important to you, yeah.
Well, they're just going to do it better. They know that it's their country, it's their culture. It's even in medical. When we go in there as a first response team, you're constantly having to reschool doctors from abroad. Okay, you're going to give this person an antibiotic, which is going to deplete their immune system long term. Might get them over this current thing, but where are you going to be with that antibiotic the next time they get it? So how do you apply medicine in that circumstance? What adjustments do you make? The Haitians know. And then if you're working with the Ministry of Health, and you can establish programs where those kinds of things will be sustainable and available as they should be, then you can start working with them to improve upon it. But if you don't know what it is to begin with and why it's the way it is, we can't know that. They do. So, and then like anywhere else, people take the greatest pride in their own in their home. And so you gotta, you know, if I'm casting a movie, I want the people that are gonna take the greatest pride in that movie. And so the automatic casting in this movie is Haitian.
In a lot of yesterday's sessions, we talked about breaking down your assumptions as a way to move forward and a way to innovate and create. What assumptions do you think well-meaning people have about Haiti post-earthquake?
About Haiti what?
Haiti post-earthquake. Assumptions that are getting in the way of actually helping in a way that would make a long-term difference.
Well, investment is a huge issue. And so investment suffers from security concerns. Mm-hmm. The security concerns, the travel advisory for Haiti is not based on security as, criminal issues. It's principally based on medical care access, which is a real issue. You know, we have, Haiti, Port-au-Prince, let's say, that's, Port-au-Prince at night is Detroit at night. Exactly that. It's not more dangerous, it's not less colorful, it's Detroit at night. So this is a very visitable place. This is a place where those foreign investors who, have had some cojones have come in, they're making money. And where there's incredibly exploitable, and I mean this in the best way, mm-hmm. sectors where you've got an incredible, a workforce that's, this is the other thing, that you have a dependency culture is as true as they're one job away from it not being. Mm-hmm. Because what we've found is that when people will often say to me, they'll give me development 1A, and I'll run into somebody at a fundraiser for Haiti. Sean, what you really got to do, I see you're with the president of Haiti and all that, you got to talk to the people. Every day I talk to the people, but they'll come over and say, well, I know Sean's organization does this, but what do you need? You got to ask 3 times, because they've had 30 years of practice of somebody asking them that, who's going to give something to them once and walk away, and they're in a survival mode, and they're going to take what they need today. So you say, no, but what do you need? And then on the 3rd time you say, what do you need? You got a game plan, because then they're going to tell you what they need. And then when you work with them to get that, you don't have to be around anymore, because they just take off and do it. And the biggest dependency culture in Haiti is the 2% that represents the importers. They are dependent on Haiti staying exactly like it is to keep their import structure and security sound. And they will be the ones first to complain about how you're building dependency in the Haitian people. So when you figure out that myth, and then you take one other element of it, corruption. How much corruption, we can't apply, and it's 9 million people, they make $1 to $2 a day, and you got, 3 people who are, do better than, an actor in Hollywood. And then somebody who does, if a couple of $1 million a year they run the town. How much real corruption is going on? The corruption is it's a systemic thing that has to do with how do you get people to trust each other that they're not taking $10 away versus $10 million away. How do you build the institutions that are accused of corruption, where really largely what you're dealing with is the incompetency, because just to get an MBA to come and stay and work in Haiti is difficult. And the only way that's going to happen is if people look at the models of the businesses that have come there that are making money. You look at, for example, Digicel, the telecom, doing very well. And to engage with those people and see how it plays out. It's like the 3-question mode. You can make, things can work. I think that the biggest myth of Haiti is that is that Haiti's on a treadmill of its own destruction. And what we're seeing now is we want to scream out and say, get in on it, because now's the time. This is the time it's going to work.
We're a little bit over, but take a minute to address, you have a high wattage audience here. Take a minute and tell them what you want them to know about Haiti, about your project, and what you need.
Well, no, I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's this, or for those who, you know, and of course we have a website and all of this that you can go to. But I think that I can talk shorthand to this crowd. I think there are plenty of people in this room who know instinctually and know with the resources that they have, that only thing is missing is a visit to Haiti. And I'm here to invite you down and be your host and you know, connect you with that area or organization that can be the tour guide to making that work. I would just say that rather than getting into a lot of details, that I've talked to journalists who have been in all the conflict areas of the world, people that we watch on television every night, to NGO workers who've been all over the world, and everyone will tell you there's something about Haiti. There's just something special about this place. And so rather than me giving you a speech, I'd just say, come on down, I'll pick you up at the airport, and we'll show you what it is. And then you'll know better than me what's going to turn you on and keep you interested there.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.